Welcome. There's 1 week left of summer. Inflation is down and the real estate market is mid, I'd say. I'm Kristen. This is Sean and Vaughn. And this week they want to fight me and find out why coming up on Mortgage People. Hello, chums.
Good day.
It was getting spicy in the WhatsApp conversation yesterday.
Yeah. So we are going to discuss some current events, some new legislation and policy. But I wanted to start before the fisticuffs with just maybe a softball. So maybe a little deal of the week. Should we go? I had borrowers, and maybe this has happened to you, where we pre-approved them at their max and with a certain down payment. And then when it came time to buy, they found something a little bit cheaper. I reduced the mortgage amount. They were fine. Everything was signed. And then when they got to the lawyer, they were like, why do we have to pay all this at the end? And there was like a $5,000 difference between their deposit and what their full down payment was. So that last $5,000 was sort of reflecting as a closing cost. It was requested by the lawyer so that they could complete the transaction. And they had assumed that their whole down payment was their deposit. And I had assumed they knew that the rest of their down payment would be paid on closing because we had been through all of the numbers and done all the paperwork and stuff. And so it turned out all right. Of course, they had the money because we had budgeted for it in the first place. But it just sort of taught me, it's one of those things that you have to learn the hard way. Like, you can't assume anything. And sometimes you don't even know what assumptions you're making until it kind of smacks you in the face. So I thought I would open it up for you guys to see if there was ever a time where you kind of had to learn something the hard way, and now it becomes a practice that you explain every single time.
Man, it sounds like that client needs a new mortgage broker.
Someone a little more attentive.
No, I mean, that happens, right? Like, you think you think that you have it kind of all laid out, and that you've communicated everything, you've been attentive. And I find it earlier in the process usually where, when clients are looking, like, they get really excited about a property that's like listed below market value, and it's obviously, to me anyway, it's obviously a marketing price. This property that's listed for $799 is really going to sell for $950, and they're just trying to get people excited about it. And I think, having been in the industry for so long, you kind of just get jaded to the fact that this is how it works. But for somebody that's new to it, they think, oh, it's on sale. They're looking to, it's an opportunity to get it at a really low price rather than what, maybe it's actually worth. And nobody else is going to see this. I'm going to swoop in and offer them asking and be the hero and get the property at that value. So I find it early on, I'm always surprised when people think like, oh, but it just seems, you just need a little bit more exposure to the market. And it doesn't take long for people to get that realization, going into some properties, checking it out. But it always kind of surprises me, like, oh yeah, not everybody knows this.
There's a whole lot of explaining. It's probably the worst part of this job, is the explaining and over explaining and belaboring the point over and over and over again, especially because the expectations and the reality seem to be so far apart. It's when we're talking about something like that, like a list price, that we know it's a marketing strategy to get interest, and you have to prepare your clients for that, or they think, oh, we can go in at asking with all these conditions. And it's like, well, probably you can't. I mean, you can, but you're probably not going to win that property. And when it comes to anything to do with finance, always explaining, yeah, your deposit is different from your down payment. There's closing costs that are also different from your down payment, because people think, okay, here it is, I have 80 grand for my down payment. You're like, well, what about closing costs? Well, that's in my down payment, right? Like, nope, sorry.
So I feel like both of you skirted being vulnerable just there and sharing a thing you had to learn the hard way. You're like, yeah, this thing that realtors usually take care of is a thing that's a hard thing for me.
It's a it's probably the third 90 seconds worth of notice that you gave us on this question that
Okay,
was
fine.
probably
Okay, that can become a segment. Learning the hard way is a new segment we can have
It's
recurring.
the only way we
All right.
learn. You know,
Um,
if you didn't tell your client not to purchase an automobile right after they did the mortgage application, then you could get in trouble.
yeah, yeah, that is something I don't, you know, you kind of get a sense of you feel like you get a sense of a person, the kinds of questions that you need to go over with them in particular. And so, like, every question is not going to be relevant for every borrower, but certainly I did have pre-approval where he went and, it took a long time. Sometimes pre-approvals are like a year and a half before anybody buys. And the next time he's got a $900 a month car payment. And I was like, well, we're in trouble now.
The car payment sometimes doesn't show up on the credit report as soon as you'd like it to. So you do the application, you talk about the debts and liabilities, but sometimes that car payment doesn't show up on the credit report. So that's another one. Again, you have to just belabor the point of like, do you have this? Do you have a student loan? Do you have a car loan? Do you have asking specific questions that you would think would come up normally, but they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, should we get into the nitty-gritty of all the stuff that you guys wanted to talk about today, but I thought was a bad idea?
Well, I wrapped my knuckles. We're ready to go.
I
Okay.
got my foil on. I've already foiled.
Foil?
You don't know what that reference is, right?
Mm.
It's a hockey reference of like the Hanson brothers from the movie Slapshot. Whenever they
Oh.
were getting ready for a game, they would tape foil on their knuckles because they were always getting in fights.
Okay. I gotta
I've
watch
seen
more
it.
hockey movies.
I
Ask me
didn't
about
remember
baseball
it.
movies.
No, really.
Okay. So first, what do we have here? Oh, the provincial planning statement that the Ontario government has come out with. They have gotten rid of the previous two. This is like two documents down into one, and I would say that there were important environmental restrictions in one of the documents that they got rid of. And so I guess we're going to do this as an approve or decline. Vaughn, you can go first. Is the new provincial planning statement actually going to address the housing crisis?
I mean, I've dug into it a little bit. It's a 60-page document. I got through the intro and the table of contents, read the first paragraph beyond that, and thought maybe I'm not even qualified to read this. But the summary of it looks fairly good. Looks like they've removed red tape, which I think is like essentially all that the government can do. We don't need to give them a ton of budget to build housing, I don't think. But they need to remove some of the red tape for builders to build. Not too much red tape. We don't want big contracts handed to building companies that build a bunch of house on swampland and in 10 years they sink into the ground. So there's an importance of regulation, but removing some of the superfluous legislation seems to be the right move.
Sean?
So was that an approve or decline, Vaughn?
Yeah, that was. Oh, yeah. Was that an approve or decline?
Approve. They've done enough. It's up to us now.
And I know where you're going, Kristen, and so I'm going to kind of go down the middle a little bit, but probably closer to a conditional approval. And the things that I like is that, as Vaughn said, they removed some of the red tape to get building done faster. What I don't like is that it gives kind of carte blanche to the provincial government to say, we need buildings here. Do I like the idea that we're going to put more density around transit hubs? Absolutely. Can we put more housing in places where people need them? There's some, the name's slipping my mind, but essentially like where they're putting a subway station near my house in Riverdale, they've designated places that are, this is going to be a transit oriented place. We want more density here. We're going to build bigger buildings here. So we're removing these buildings to build transit. Afterwards, we're not putting that small building there. We're going to put more density there. So I like that idea that we can get rid of some of the process that goes into it and building more housing there. What I don't like is that it gives too much leeway to building through the green belt and to building into environmental protected areas. I think some of those protections are necessary. I think we can still build amazing neighborhoods that protect those environments. And I don't think it has to be one or the other, but I think that's how the government sees that. We don't need to protect the environment. We need to build housing. And so I don't like that it's one or the other. I like the idea of more housing, though.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, so I conditionally approve.
Okay. I decline because I detect fraud. I
Nice.
just think, I think that I agree we have to build more density, especially around transit hubs. Again, I feel like this is just a screen that says, look, we're addressing it, but it really is, everything that they do seems to me to be to line the pockets of like a wealthy subset of cronies. So I feel like I will be happy if I'm wrong. But we know there's something that Environmental Defense said in their statement responding to this policy statement, and that is that if they build low density housing, so like big single family houses in sort of in a sprawly way, they are using up our very limited, precious construction crews for that. So every low density building that they build is high density that we need, or mid density that we need, that's not able to get built fast enough. So I feel I'm very, very skeptical. I will pass on this deal. Thank you very much.
So what we need is more workers, right? Is that what we're saying?
We do. I mean, here's the other thing too, is that Toronto is on I think it's called a floodplain. So like all of the green belt around us prevents worse flooding. And so people have just been through this incredible flood in Toronto, and we were saved by all of that like marshland and stuff. If they pave that, we're going to be a basin. We're going to just be, like it's really, there's many reasons why I think we need to stop touching our precious land where we can grow things and let life be, because it's not just because it's pretty, it's not just because we care about nature. It's also like in resistance to climate change and changing weather patterns and stuff. Like there's reasons why we don't want all of that sprawl.
There has to be a balance somewhere along the line, right? Like you have to be able to build. I feel like there's underdeveloped places north of Toronto that are along, major lakes that could be built up a little bit more, that wouldn't necessarily flood Toronto or flood other places. Like I think like it needs to be a little bit more strategic than what the government is currently doing, which is like stamp, rubber stamping everything that comes from the developers. I was thinking like the green belt. Last year, he made the big show of opening up the green belt and to some specific properties that got approved, and they were all like 9 out of 10 of them were from developers that were at his daughter's wedding. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was still like, here's the list. Oh, how did this list get done? Oh, it's the exact list that was written.
And they wanted to build mansions on it too.
This is the thing.
Yeah, it doesn't solve any problem, but it does line the pockets of his buddies. I mean, we have a gangster style provincial government at the moment. I think we can do better, but we also need to cut some red tape. So like here we are with this dilemma. And I agree, Kristen, we don't want just a select handpicked group of builders from our current administration's, friend list or Rolodex. It's got to be opened up and be more competitive.
But is there a way for this to, like, if we're going to build more housing, it's going to it's going to benefit developers. It's going to immediately benefit them. Like, I don't think there's any way around building more housing that doesn't benefit that subset of people. And I don't think that's a big group of people that have the funds, the wherewithal, the workforces to build places, whether that's high density, low density mansions, community housing. Like, there is only a limited number of people that this can ever benefit, regardless of how they approach it.
Sure. I think I'm it's not that I like begrudge builders of making money. I begrudge building mansions when what we need are, for like purpose rent apartments, like those kinds of things. And so I just think there are other solutions, and something that I know, Sean, you're a fan of Front Burner, and I was listening to Front Burner, the most recent one, where she's talking about the pollster. She's talking about the pollster. I can't remember what guy.
I didn't watch that one.
He's saying basically, like, there are these hot button issues, and they get a lot of attention, and people swing one way or another about them, but there's no nuance. It's just like, yes, I hate this, and yes, I love this. And there's not like, so, yes, we need to cut red tape, and it needs to be for these types of things, and we need to still make restrictions are there to keep certain people safe, to keep,
Well, a good example of that was when we were having escalating rental prices, and the Ford government implemented rent control. And that actually made the problem worse. Rent actually went up when we implemented rent control. And it also took some projects, some purpose-built rental projects off of the planning. Some of those investors pulled back on that because it was no longer profitable to build purpose-built rentals. Even though they were planned and they were fairly far down the line, they stopped doing that. So it's like whack-a-mole, right? Like, they see this big light of, this is a hot issue. This is going to make us look good if we put rent control in. They, slam that down, and now we've got this problem that not enough purpose-built rentals are being built, and there's not enough places for people to rent.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's like looking at the big red light and not realizing all the other things that are around it.
Yeah. And I think that's a matter of consultation. I think is something that stood out, and we don't have to, we should wrap
This is the worst.
I told you.
I don't know if there's anything,
Save us, Vaughn.
anything that I hate more than the government paying for consultation.
No, but there are people within the ranks of government, and there are we'll get into it when we talk about our next topic, which I guess
Why don't we just go there?
The best thing, if anybody says, what do you want to be when you grow up? There's only one answer. And that answer is a consultant. Somebody's going to pay me for my opinion. That's what I want. I don't produce anything other than my opinion, and you're going to pay dearly for it. And when the taxpayers' dollars go towards more consulting, it drives me absolutely
No. Okay. I'll give you an example. So the next thing that we're going to talk about that I didn't want to talk about, but you think is going to be great attention getting material, is the new decision to close safe consumption sites. Basically, I don't remember what they're called. They're called different things all over, but I think in Ontario they're supervised consumption and treatment sites, which means drug users have a place to go to test that their drugs don't have fentanyl poisoning, to obtain free and safe needles, to dispose of the needles safely, and to also access different services, recovery, unhoused services, shelter beds, etc. And Doug Ford is closing, I think, 11 of them or something like that. So the next question is, approve or decline. Do you agree with this decision?
Well, if they don't have safe consumption sites, people won't do drugs anymore. So that will solve the whole problem.
You're already making me so mad.
I'll decline. I agree with you. I think it's a dumb move. I don't think that it's not something that the community was asking for. I was reading an article from last year after I want to say her name. It is Caroline Hubner Muckarat was killed. Actually, it's in my neighborhood at Queen and Carlisle, which is just down the street from my house. There was no like community protests to close the site, but there was consultation, there was community involvement to say, here's what we need for this service to be open. To think that they're going to take away the safe injection site and then have people not shoot up anymore or not go behind the school or in the alleyway and not die in the middle of the street. Like, it's just moving the problem from one place to the next, which is less controlled. And, you know, one of the things that I heard Doug Ford say is we don't want kids to be picking up needles in a schoolyard or like in that neighborhood because they're closing them within 200 meters of daycares and schools. It's like, well, where are they going to do it then? You know, if we're putting them in one place, it's not like all of a sudden they're just going to go somewhere else. Those sites were open because drug use was higher in that neighborhood and to provide them with that. So it's just a like knee-jerk reaction to, well, everybody in my community is saying that we don't need them, or everybody. It's not the case. It just sounds good. It sounds like something that should win in votes. So I'll decline.
I mean, there's another side of it, you know, that the Ford government is investing or is proposing to invest $100 million into recovery treatment, right? So it's more of an issue of philosophy or perspective. You don't want a situation where you incentivize drug use in a neighborhood. It's illegal. I don't think that people that are addicted to drugs are criminal, but the drugs are illegal. So a safe injection site may be incentivizing that drug use, or at least it could potentially be prohibiting people from getting help that they need to get over their drug addictions. So do I think it's a great idea just to shut down? I think it's like 19 out of 22 that they're shutting down in the province, which seems to me kind of crazy, because people need help. Have we been serving them the right way with currently what's going on? That's sort of my question about it. It's really difficult to answer. I can't approve or decline. You know, the people on the front lines that are helping the addicted people, they're going to have the best sort of idea, but nobody's going to be able to predict the future. So maybe it's been too soft. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more strict in terms of rehabilitating instead of just giving a green light to continue to keep using. It's challenging.
Okay, so is that a decline, or is that
I'm not
approve with snitches?
It's like if it's a green light or a red light or my options, then I have to choose the amber, you know?
Okay. Yeah, I decline, and I think this goes to the point of consultation. People who work, so the community center that's near where you live and that woman died, my neighbor who I spoke to last night works there. She was there, and you know, so people in her position are not being consulted. So when I talk about consultations, I'm not talking about hiring a consultant. I'm talking about having people on the front lines say, this is what we need. And the people on the front lines say, we need funds to have a more fulsome, you know, offerings. We need more staff, etc. What this does is this is going to be a police matter now, because things are, you know, it is legal to have a certain amount of drugs at a safe consumption site, but on the street it isn't. And so it's going to be pulling attention and and funds probably from the people who are already delivering service. They could deliver it better with more funding, of course. Um, and this is just going to take money from them and put it toward the police, basically, because you're criminalizing it on a different level now. And I don't think that people who are addicted to drugs are incentivized by safe consumption sites to do drugs. But that's not, again, what you said. I do agree with that. You maybe don't know enough about it to have a full opinion, because a lot of people who don't know have an opinion. And I think, like, on the topic of nuance, you have to really care about this issue, and you have to really talk to people who are in harm reduction, and you have to really look at what the data says. And the data is that this is helpful for communities. So I decline, and I hate this government.
Well, the
This
two studies that the Ford government issued to try to get that data actually disagreed with closing the sites. So it wasn't that they didn't go out and get that data; they just chose to do their own thing because it sounded better. It's like closing the emergency room and opening a gym in its place. It's like, sure,
Yes,
yeah, we should
yes,
all work
because
out, right?
there's step one, which is be safe and don't die of a drug poisoning. And then there's step two is get into a treatment center if you want to get off it. And
We don't
statistics
believe
show,
in that, though. That's what they just said. Like, we don't believe in that's the solution. We don't
yeah.
believe in safe consumption sites. So it's like the feeling is that, but we're gonna have beer in corner stores, Kristen.
Yeah.
So
Somebody said something, I can't remember what article I read, but I think it was an MP or somebody, MPP, excuse me, was like, they're choosing ideology over data. And I think any politician who does that drives me nuts. And it's we want to get into it. It's also the reason I stopped supporting Elizabeth May a million years ago in the Green Party, because she was like, finally, okay, we can drill oil as long as it's keep it in Canada or whatever. And it's like, you're the climate change person and you're not even listening to science anymore. So I digress.
There is an issue that, and this is like very, very sensitive, is that there was 2,500 deaths from drugs in Ontario last year. So that's a big spike in the number. But I don't think that it supports, I don't think that number didn't pop up just because we have safe injection sites. I think that number is more representative of fentanyl that's killing massive amount of
But you can
people.
test your drugs for fentanyl in those safe injection sites.
I mean, the death toll is so big that you have to ask questions about whether this current system is working.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with safe consumption sites, though. I think
don't think
people are
so
finding
either.
fentanyl in their weed, even, isn't it?
I think that you can use that data to support making a change, but I don't think that that's a good way of looking at the data.
Yeah.
they administered, I don't know if this was once, I think this is one site administered in 1 year. They administered like over 700 reversing, the overdose reversing
Naloxone or
medication.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. So let's say that's all the locations, but that's 700 plus people who had events that could have been life threatening. And so, yes, there was 2,500 drug deaths, but it would have been more without, because it's not like it's not like they're giving them drugs at these safe injection sites. It's that they're bringing the drugs, and if they're going to go shoot up in the alley or behind the daycare, they're going to die there. There's no
and they're
safety
going to leave their
measures in
needles
place.
there too if they don't die.
Exactly. And not to mention hepatitis C, AIDS, other communicable diseases, because there's not a location for needle exchange.
I do have a question, and this is going to be an opinion, because there's two factors here. One, are they actually going to close all these sites? This is scheduled for March of next year. Is that actually going to happen? And two, is that $100 million that's promised going to be realized? Right, $100 million seems like we could fix a problem with that much money, that amount of resources.
Mhm.
Like I'm skeptical of either of these things coming to fruition.
I think people are going to fight the closures, which is, if you know anybody who works in this area, they don't need any more. They need support only. They don't need to fight, for the lives of these people. So like, it's heartbreaking to see how much advocacy they have to do on top of their already incredibly hard job. But I think people are already going to be organizing against
There was
this. And I
no
think
protest. Yeah, no protest in my neighborhood to close the center. Like if there was a protest, I missed it completely. Like
Mhm.
it's not like there's this big community drive to close them. I think people are just gonna close because the people that they're helping are like silent. They can't come
voiceless.
out. They're voiceless. Yeah. So I really think that they will just close. I think that it just is what it is because there's not a group that they're not like saving the baby kittens. You know what I mean? It's like they're just a voiceless group that is.
I
Well,
don't agree that they're
politically,
voiceless, but I agree that they're an overlooked and unconsidered and uncared for population, um, as compared to kittens.
Does this help our property values though? Like, does this make our property values go up?
I can't tell if you're being snide. Okay, now you're okay. I
I
mean,
am. I'm
to
joking.
relate this back to mortgages, of course, this has to do with we all live in the GTA. We're coming up against this stuff where we live, where we work, and our clients. So it does relate to property values, but I think if you have, to me, this is a place of care, and if you want to go into the studies of drug addiction, it's disconnection that is the core of drug addiction, and this is a way of connecting with people. So if you cut that off, you're just making your whole community less safe, less kind, and less caring. And I think if we want to look at what this government has done, he's underfunded teachers, he's underfunded hospitals. Now he's just like leaving drug users, out, literally out in the cold. I just like, this is a bad direction. It's all very anti the way I would like things to go.
I mean, this government is also underfunded sort of retirement housing, and we saw when the pandemic swept through how bad they got hit. So I'm not a fan of this government. Also, the neighborhoods that this affects are not conservative based neighborhoods, right? So when you think about Leslieville or on the other side, like Parkdale on the other side of the city,
Mm-hmm.
those are typically NDP based areas. So when you think of like this is a political attack, perhaps,
Yeah.
where his base doesn't live there.
Yeah, or maybe it's even just like a really sick sideshow, a distraction of some kind for the energies of those people.
This is
That's
a
a really cynical way to look at it.
podcast today.
See, I didn't want to go here.
It's good to see that we
Yeah.
all have a heart, and that I think that there's a political strategy in that, and which is really disappointing that you would wager people's lives and their ability for recovery on some sort of political strategy.
Yeah. Okay, well, hey, at the end of it all, we're still friends, and I feel pretty good about that. Should we wrap it up? Anybody have any important news that we didn't touch on? See you next
We
week.
missed the stress test conversation from last week. People are. My phone is ringing off the hook to talk.
They've been
about the stress
waiting.
test.
Okay, well, they'll
yeah.
have to wait one more week. We don't have time. It's too long already. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are proudly 100 plus subscribed at this point. So thank you for listening and have a great week. Bye.